event tonight. I'm Liz. I'm the chair of NYEMSC, and this is Jax, our vice chair, who's going to be moderating the event tonight. So we're going to get started so we stay on time. We compiled all the questions that you guys have sent in ahead of time. And just for time purposes, Jax is going to be directing the question, or we'll be popcorning to each other, but essentially we'll have at least 2 people answer each question. So Jax, take it away.
All right, so thank you again to all of our panelists. We're so excited to be hosting this event. I myself am a rising MS4, so super appreciative of the time you guys are taking to be here and answer all our questions. So before we begin, I just wanted to have our panelists introduce themselves so we get an idea of who they are. So if each of you guys could say your name, what program you are in or going to be joining, and to give us an idea just of your applicant background, whether or not you applied in-state, out of state, first gen, or anything else that you'd like to add. I'm gonna start off with Liz.
Okay, so I'm Liz. I am or was an MS4 at the CUNY School of Medicine, incoming PGY1 at Mount Sinai Morningside West. And I am from New York. I applied in New York and out of state as well. And I'm an MD candidate and also first gen. So I'll popcorn over to Axel.
Yeah, I'm Axel. I'm a former Sinai 4th year. We'll be staying as a PGY1 at Sinai as well. I'm from New York, but I applied a little bit more broadly, mostly New York, but kind of all over the East Coast because my whole family's here. What was the other thing? Sorry.
That's great. Yeah. Go ahead and popcorn someone else.
Oh, sure. I'll popcorn it to Jillian.
Hi guys, I'm Jillian. I was an MS4 at Nova Southeastern University in Florida, and I'm now an incoming PGY1 or PGY0 right now for Stonybrook. I was a DO candidate, now a DO, and I'm originally from New York, but I went to undergrad and medical school both in Florida. So I'm kind of like a hybrid out-of-state candidate, I would say, but I applied to all over, like basically all over the country, mostly on the East Coast. And I'll send it to Alex.
Hello, everyone. My name's Alex. I am a current intern at Stonybrook. I went to NYIT. I am a DO as well. I was actually on the initial board for this New York EMSC like a few years ago. So it's cool to see how far it's come from like our first initial one happy hour we did as an event. So this is a big step forward, which is awesome. So thanks for coming on this. I am a first generation. I am from Long Island. I'm actually in my hometown. I grew up in like the Setauket Stonybrook area, was not expecting to come to my hometown area to go to residency, but very happy about it. And who we got left? We got Destinee.
Hey everyone, I'm Destinee. I'm a current intern at New York Presbyterian, which is split at Columbia and Cornell. I went to medical school in Iowa, which is where I've done most of my like adult years. So undergrad and med school, both in Iowa. And then I was actually born in California. This is my first time living on the East Coast ever. I applied very broadly. Most of my schools or programs I actually interviewed at were on the West Coast in California. And then I disappointed my mom by ultimately choosing to come here. So kind of making my way across, maybe we'll go even further east on the next round. I'm also first gen and out of state, I guess, is my thing here.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys again. So we're gonna get started with the questions. The first one that we have is a kind of a burning question everybody wants to know about, but now that step 1 is pass fail, is there going to be more emphasis on research and additional things on your CV in terms of residency applications? And I'm going to start off with Alex.
Being on the side of it now where I've been involved with interviews and whatnot, we've talked about it. I think definitely, you want a good step 2 score if that's staying as a scoring kind of system. I do think your SLO is super important, and it's kind of not really a change for emergency medicine because they really care about what you look like on your SLO, your standard letter of evaluation when you're applying for your residency position. So it's kind of like, if anything, everyone else kind of caught up to this idea of, you know, we'd like to see how our candidates do on their rotations. They're not just a number based on scoring. That's kind of how we've been treating it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I didn't do great on step 1 and I'm still a resident. So I think it's okay that you know, do a good job on your rotations, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You know, Alex and I were both in a class where step 1 was still scored. But even with that, I think EM has always emphasized the slows, like she said, rotations. And then I think step 2 has always for EM been either as important, if not more important than step 1.
Okay, all right, good to know. I think one of the topics that we also wanted to talk about was the planning for 3rd and 4th year, which can get kind of tricky. So first question in this topic, what can you do during your 3rd year to help your chances of matching? You know, when would you start applying for away rotations and how? And maybe I'll start off with one of our M4s. Liz?
Sure. So I think one of the most important things to do as a 3rd year is just to do really well on your rotations, because that sets you up to doing well in step 2, which we just discussed is important and perhaps increasingly more important. I think if I have the timeline correct, that a lot of the VSLO away applications opened in March. So I remember for our school, we were advised to start compiling all our documents ahead of time so that we'd be ready to go once the application was open. I think they do occur on a rolling basis, so you can be applying through March and April. And then I think also it's important to start identifying who you want to write your letters of recommendation, because it's important to give your letter writers advance notice. And Jillian, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so actually as a DO applicant, I'm sure if there's any other DO medical students on here, they'll agree. Most of our schools didn't have a hospital associated with us, so you're kind of out there for your rotations. So kind of just making connections like right off the bat is really helpful. I actually had an opportunity to turn one of my pediatrics rotations into pediatric emergency medicine. So I was able to get a letter early on in my 3rd year. Obviously that's not going to happen for most of you, but like if you can try to, you know, maneuver something like that to make it happen would be really helpful. Again, a lot of osteopathic medical schools don't allow you to have an emergency medicine rotation in your 3rd year. So if yours is scheduled for your 4th year, like mine was, you know, kind of just find ways to get yourself into the ED. If you haven't really had that many opportunities, just like introduce yourself, you know, maybe attend a conference or 2, kind of just to get your name out there early on. But like Liz said, kind of just doing well on your rotations is most important, because there's really not much as a 3rd year that you can do for EM.
Keep in mind, have an open mind when you're going into your 3rd year as well, because this is the time where you really want to make sure you're ruling out the things you don't want to do. I feel like people get pointed back to EM, especially if you end up in the field, because it's an awesome field. But at the same time, really keep an open mind. It's okay to be like on the fence and think about a couple different specialties once it comes to your 4th year. Just make sure you're seeing things you don't want to do. Like you don't want to do rounding, you don't want to be in the OR, things like that. Like you really want to pick out your niche.
Okay, awesome. And then kind of going off of that, how does one choose an away rotation site? I know historically people do 1 or 2. I've been told personally conflicting information about, you know, you shouldn't do 1 away if you plan to stay like in state, or you shouldn't do it here, or vice versa. So what do you guys have to say about that?
I have a lot, I can say something about this just because, you know, I obviously, like I said, was born in California, did med school in Iowa, and now I'm in New York. I think that, yeah, all the conflicting info, like you should just do what you want to do. It's going to work out in the end, regardless. But I do think that if there's a geographic location or a specific program that you're really interested in that you maybe don't have ties to, that it can be a good idea to try to apply to that region or that program, so they know that you have a genuine interest. Otherwise, there are other ways to express interest in a geographic location or program, but the away rotation can be one of those ways.
I also wanted to add that, oh, sorry, Axel, you go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just additionally, I mean, I'm in state, I'm from New York, but I rotated at NYU, which is another New York program. If you're kind of I mean, I end up applying broadly, but if you're kind of sure that you want to stay in a particular part of the country or in a particular city, I think checking out another program and applying for an away there is like perfectly fine as well. Like Destinee said, it's fine, like it'll work out. Just make sure that whatever place you pick, it's a place that you might be potentially interested in, whatever the program's about, whether it's the location, kind of their ethos. But I think there's really no sort of rule against applying to a particular place. And the other thing is, I think last year I was advised to only apply to one. I'm not sure what the case is for you guys now, but I think people, from what I've heard, I know there are some who are applying to multiple and taking a few. But again, could be part of the conflicting information that you've heard.
I thought it was pretty important, at least like on my interviews, a couple of people asked me, you spent the last 8 years in Florida, like, are you sure you want to come back to New York? And because I had done an away rotation in New York, it kind of showed that I took my 1 or 2 away rotations and did one in New York, meant that like I actually was serious about coming back home. So if you like are dead set on a certain area, I would recommend doing a rotation there and getting a letter from there, because it kind of just opens up that area for you if you haven't been there in a while or if you've never even been there before.
I also just wanted to add that my home institution was a community hospital, and if you're interested about what it's like at a more academic hospital or a county hospital, I think getting to know what types of patients you want to work with and how hands-on you can be is also important going into your residency application, knowing what types of programs you want to apply to. And I think I wanted to say something else, but it's escaping me, so I'll say it later when I remember.
Okay, thank you guys. And I know 4th year can be very confusing to navigate since you applied to ERAS and then you have interviews. I myself have no idea what 4th year is supposed to look like. So if you guys could just give us like a snapshot of how you planned your 4th year around these nebulous interviews that we don't yet have.
I feel like I was taking 4th year like month by month. I was like, in September, maybe I'll find something for February at some point. And that's very okay. It's really nice that you kind of have that time to really pick out and flesh out what you want to do for the year. Trying to square away at least one audition, I think, is super important in the next month or so. Just trying to, email places. They have almost every residency program or somewhere that you can do an audition has a website that will, give information that they want to see, that you can email the coordinator, say, hey, I'm really interested in your program. I'm hoping to do an audition. I think that's good. Getting your foot in the door for places also you can do like subspecialty rotations, as in like doing an ultrasound rotation, like Jill was mentioning, doing a pediatric rotation. So it kind of helps you get into PEM. Like there's things that you can do that will help you. And you can also get that SLO we were talking about before. You can get SLOs that count as like an ultrasound SLO, and it's part of the subspecialty. It is another program evaluating me. And I did send it later on. Like I think I did that rotation in November. That's like in the middle of interview season. I'm already getting interviews at that point. And I was sending out and saying, hi, like I got an updated SLO. I'm still very interested in your program. Like haven't gotten, not saying like haven't heard from you and I expect it or something, but in a way being like, just want to keep you on my radar. Here's additional information about me. So you don't get to see the SLOs, but just to say that it's been updated on your application is nice.
I think also in your 4th year, at first when I was applying, everyone was telling me like, oh, like do a trauma rotation, do like an ICU rotation, like fill up your entire year with all these amazing rotations. Because I do not do that. You are going to be so stressed out with just interviews on interviews and interviews. You're not going to have time to take off 5 days for interviews when you're on like an ICU rotation. So if you can try to land those EM rotations in your summer months, and just like Alex said, I did the same thing. I did an ultrasound toxicology rotation in like October, November, sent that letter later on as like a, hey, remember me, update my application, maybe you want to give me an interview now, do that. And then after that, just do the rest of your school's requirements. See if there's like a virtual rotation you can do. I did virtual radiology. It was lovely. I didn't have to take any days off. Do like your internal medicine rotation, but like do it cardio, do something that, you can still maneuver and get your interviews done with, but also not kill yourself, because your months that you're on your EM rotations, you're going to be busting your butt and working so extremely hard that you're going to want to just, relax a little bit and just keep learning and doing your interviews and just doing well with that stuff. So don't go crazy filling up your entire 4th year with crazy rotations, because you don't have to do it.
I spent the last 4 months of 4th year, like planning for my wedding and going on vacations in COVID world. So, and it's fine. You're going to be okay. You will graduate a doctor, and that's wonderful. Please enjoy this time.
Yeah, just totally would echo the same thing. Talking about weddings, I'm getting married in 10 days. I spent most of this fourth year planning my wedding.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like, I think I did my 2 months of EM, did like two. It's also really good to do things you're interested in. You didn't get the chance to do before during your first couple years of med school. I did like an EKG elective. I did like a random dermatology elective just for fun. And whatever mandatory you still have to fulfill for your school. But that's really, I did the bare minimum. Because and I was comfortable with that. I think you'll be really exhausted after the first 3 years of med school and leading into the beginning of fourth year as well. You kind of start right off. So kind of just taking some time for yourself, and if you got some money saved up, travel, do whatever, spend time with family. I think that's really important.
All great advice. I saw Destinee's message in the chat saying to take this year and not become chronically tired like her. So okay, so we are going to move on to away rotations and slows, which we kind of touched on just now. But more specifically, during the away rotations, what is the best way that M4s can make an impression, and like how can students be of help rather than a burden to interns and residents?
There's so much of like reading the room that is very important. You want to be helpful, you want to do this, but you don't want to overbear it. And especially if you're very interested in EM and you're like, I need to show up and do well. Like I needed to do well on evaluations. Like I was saying, my steps weren't great. There's a time for questions. There's a time for being involved, but like best things you can do for yourself. Number one, turn your phone off, or don't be looking at your phone when you're on your rotation. Be involved. Like, don't hog a computer if, they need a computer, but like looking up stuff, if there's a critical patient that's coming into a trauma bay, even if you don't know how to use the ultrasound, bring it over, just throw some gel on that ultrasound and hand it to the resident. That's awesome. Being accountable for your patients and making sure that you are not above anything. Like patient needs a pillow, they need to be fluffed. Like that's your patient, you're going to go do that. And it's very helpful and it's noticed. And best advice I can also give you, any room you go into, which it's silly, put a pair of gloves on and just be ready. Because if you have gloves on, I might look at you and be like, come here, you're going to help me do this right now. Versus, just be there, be ready.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I totally agree with everything that was said and what Jillian typed. I think going through kind of the applicants this past cycle and things like not to do, don't, again, read the room. I think some of the things that were like don'ts that we kind of noticed were like, don't be maybe correcting the residents or the attending on like what you think should be done during a trauma, or like, don't be talking badly about people, just like what Jillian said. Like, we are all kind of together. We just met you. Don't be gossiping about other residents within the program. Like we all, we are all part of the process in choosing our incoming classes. And so it's important to like, just, put your best foot forward and I don't know, just be professional. And, but being enthusiastic and helpful is always shit.
I also want to say that a concise presentation I found is very important in EM. Like I remember I did my EM rotation right after doing like an FM rotation, IM rotation. So I was giving this long spiel and then my attending was like, no, just stop. Like you need to reframe the presentation for EM. And that's what I think helped me, I guess, like realize that I had to be in a different mindset. And also sometimes they ask for the must not miss diagnosis before like what you think is most likely. So I think just like familiarizing yourself with what is expected for you specifically in EM could be helpful. And I also remembered what I forgot earlier, which is that I remember last year they were very strict about students doing 2 EM rotations because they wanted it to be as equitable as possible given the COVID situation. So I would definitely recommend checking like the cord recommendations and not going against that, because that can end up looking bad on your part.
2 things I'm going to add on to that, kind of what Liz said. So the situation I was in with my school, so I came from an osteopathic school. We didn't have a home site. So I kind of couldn't do an EM rotation before the application cycle like everybody else did. So when I was applying to a lot of these, I had to sort of like sign an addendum that said, I'm not applying to other away rotations, but I had to personally reach out to them and say, this is like, I don't have a home site. Like I don't have another opportunity to do this. And they actually were very nice. And I was able to do my 2 aways. So if you are in a situation where you're Homeside schedules your EM rotation for your program in March, like mine was, I had it like 2 months ago, you know, it's okay, like just be able to schedule your OAs and you'll be okay. And the other thing was for your OA rotations, if you don't know how to do a procedure and a resident says like, hey, you know, go do it, and you don't know how to do it, it's totally okay to ask them to like walk you through it. You know, they would much rather teach you along the way, or like have you watch them do the first one and you guys do the second one, then you jump in there and try because you saw it on a video one time. Like, ask for help. It's totally okay, and you will not look bad if you do. They'd rather everybody be safe.
Great. So our next question is about slows. So can you talk a little more about a slow and what goes into it? I'm gonna pick Axel for this one.
Sure, I'll go. I mean, I think it stands for, I think Alex mentioned this earlier, it's the standard letter of evaluation. It's really important. It really kind of just details sort of different characteristics that you exhibited while on your shifts during your rotation, how well you took ownership of your patients, how well do you work with the rest of the team, were you enthusiastic, do you seem interested, what kind of level they thought you were performing at. I don't think we read our own, so I don't necessarily know what was in mine, but I guess it worked out. But I think I think it just goes off of, in terms of going off of the advice that was given earlier, just kind of doing your best, being enthusiastic and kind of reading the room. And I think those are all the things that are kind of reflected in the slow. I would imagine some of the PGY ones would know if they've interviewed students recently, but that's kind of my understanding of it.
I think you explained it well, Axel. They will categorize you, and on those slows basically say, we would rank this person highly, we would not rank this person. You know, that very rarely happens that they would say we would not rank this person, but it really does compare you. You know, if you're doing an emergency medicine rotation at a very established place that has a residency program, you're going to have, it's like a very reputable thing. Like, and EM's a very small world, by the way. I mean, I'm sure you'll hear that over and over again, but on the interview trail, I literally had, you know, I was interviewing for a place in Tampa, and a guy was like, oh, I actually did residency with this person who wrote your letter. That's so great. And kind of gives like insight right away. You know, I've got to hear a couple of my letters. It's really just, when it comes down to it, like, you want to be a team player, you want to be enthusiastic. They don't expect you to know everything as a student. That is not the goal at all, but you need to be teachable, you know, and seeking out feedback. There's just things that I think, like, there's pretty good advice on like the EMR websites, but it's really just going through the flow with it. I don't know.
And so to kind of continue on the topic, a little nitty gritty, but how many slows do you get, and do you ask for one? Is that something that's automatically done? How does that work?
They're automatically, pretty much, if you do an audition rotation, it's expected and it's compiled by the group of, you know, faculty who work with the residency program. So it's not something you really have to ask for. You can ask for an individual slow. I don't know how much that would benefit you though. When I say an individual, it'd be going up to Dr. So-and-so and being like, hey, we've worked really well together this whole time. I'd really like for you to write my slow. There'll be a big component of writing the actual piece together. It's like sat down and done together by a group of faculty. So it's not something you really have to ask for. It's expected, unless you go into a rotation and you say, hey, I'm not asking for a slow for you, but that's a very weird thing to do. You know, don't waste their time, don't waste your time. So
I think also it's important to ask toward the beginning of who specifically you should address the like, I guess, the request for the letter, because on ERAS you still have to designate a specific person and send them the email so that they then upload the ERAS, upload the slow on your behalf.
At my program, EM was one of the like semi-required rotations, so either EM or ICU before you graduate. So at my program, if yours is like that, I did have to ask for the slow at the beginning of the rotation, because obviously there will be half of the medical students going through that same rotation, and not all of them were going into EM. So I guess just asking, I think saying that you're interested in EM and then asking whether or not you need to like request a slow is always a safe thing to do.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's see. I'm going to move on to the application materials topic. So we got a lot of questions about the CV. How do you highlight what you've done on your CV, and like how do you make yourself stand out among all the applications that the EM world gets? And I'm going to pick on Jillian here.
Okay, let's see if there's anything on your application that you think that you did that was really great or really unique. Like I went to Cuba for a medical mission trip, and that was something that not a lot of people got to do. I kind of highlighted that on my application. I put that on my, a little bit in my noteworthy characteristics, and I put it again during my volunteer spot. And I may have even mentioned it in my personal statement. So if there's something that you think was really great, there's 3 options that you can throw it into. You do 1, 2, 3, or all of them. Try to not put all the fluff on your application. Like in your CV, I once sat down with someone and my CV was like 7 pages long. I thought this was awesome. And he was like, this is horrible. I can't tell what you did. Where's this leadership? Was this volunteer? So it's always good to just, write what your role was and then have like a 1-line summary of what you did. You don't need to like have like a laundry list of the same thing, copy and paste it all over again, because then it doesn't stand out at all. And if it is like a 1-liner and someone does want to know more about it, they're going to ask you on your interview. So kind of keeping it, get like the nuts and bolts of it. And then if someone's like, oh, like what was this? I saw this on your application. Like, can you tell me more about it? Awesome. Now you have a 10-minute talking point. So kind of just some things like that.
Yeah, so I think one thing that helped me out as well is having sort of a trend there's an ambulance going by. Kind of having a trend or of certain things I was interested in. I did a lot of like human rights work, did a lot of advocacy work. I'm not saying everyone has to do the same thing, but just making it clear what your interests are and how that might parlay you into being a good fit for the specialty and to good fit on a team, I think is really important to have on whether it's your CV or your personal statement. And it should be kind of clear. From my standpoint, I was told that what kind of helped me is it was kind of clear what I was about and just kind of being genuinely yourself, really showing what those interests are. I think people will see if you're kind of trying to step outside of that a little bit, because these doctors who kind of interview and the individuals who interview have interviewed thousands and thousands of students. So I think they kind of get a feeling for that. So kind of just be genuine, show what your interests are, but really have a couple interests that really stand out that you can really talk about, be able to talk about everything on your CV if somebody asks you about it, right? It's kind of a red flag if you list an experience and then kind of have no idea what it's about. So those are some of the things that I'd say. I mean, I think, in terms of the personal statement, like Jillian said, you don't need to rewrite your CV in the personal statement. They can read that separately. So maybe picking a couple points that you really want to stress, that you want to talk about, and really kind of parlaying that into why you think you'd be good fit. And I think the last thing I'd say, one of my attendings and mentors told me that, like one of the other things you don't want to do is, I think, don't mention how you're good fit for EM because you did everything else and you didn't like it. And so you picked EM because EM is a little bit of everything. It sounds kind of intuitive that you wouldn't do that, but apparently it's been done in the past. So I would avoid doing that as well, because that's not really a good way to sell people into why you like the specialty.
Also, just in terms of formatting, like you do this through ERAS, so some of the work will be done for you, but they're going through a lot of CVs when they go through the application. So try to be concise. Like I would say no more than 3 bullet points per each experience that you're talking about, and definitely quality over quantity, because they're not going to ask you about everything. They don't have that much time during the interview itself. So make sure that what they're choosing is something you can actually talk about, like what Axel was saying. And they definitely care about longitudinal experiences, leadership, your experiences as part of a team, more than just like a volunteer thing you did for 2 hours on like a random weekend. So be selective about what you put on.
With that being said, I do think that like I know people are like typing questions as well that about, like how far back to include, and then like other like maybe non-clinical jobs. I listed my work in retail, my work in like waitressing and restaurant work. And I was told by multiple people that that was a positive because, first of all, the ER is like kind of like working in a restaurant. Like it's like customer service, you're like juggling multiple things at the same time. But also I think it just shows that you had like a life before, you considered other things, you've done other things. And I feel like it served me really well to include those things. So I don't think, if something is significant to you and really shapes your experience, just because it's not in a hospital, I don't think that's significant.
undergrad up is when you're going to list everything that you're putting on your CV pretty much. And, like was mentioned before, really the volunteer effort that was 2 hours on a day, they're going to want to talk to you instead. Like, were you going and doing, a boxing class with Parkinson patients like every week? Like, that's what they want to talk about, instead of being like, great, you like at the sideline of a marathon and you put that on your CV. Like, you'll filter it out. What was I going to add to something? Just scrolling through the questions. Yeah, just up undergrad and up. They're going to want to talk to you about stuff not related to emergency medicine, flowing from kind of your CV to personal statement to actual interviews when you're having those conversations. There's a special area in the CV or on ERAS that's for hobbies. And I was like full panic when I'm writing these hobbies out at first, because I'm like, I can't put like my hobbies like binge drinking when I'm not in medical school. I don't think they can see that as my answer. But like people want to talk to you about like your experiences, like surfing or even like doing puzzles. There's things that like people will literally sit and have a conversation with you about. And that's much better than being like, so tell me what you think about like being an EM doctor and what you think that's like. Like they want to talk to you about your life experiences. And if you're passionate about them, they're going to love that even more.
And don't lie about your hobbies just to like fit a certain mold, because what if your interviewer is an expert in like bird watching and you say that that's one of your hobbies? Like, you definitely have to be prepared to talk about it and be genuine about it.
Yeah, I had an interviewer who I put sailing as one of my hobbies. My husband's involved in the competitive sailing world, and they tried to pimp me on like boats and ask me questions because they literally sailed to New Zealand for a year on, and to the fact that like I could talk about it was better than me being like, oh, I like kind of have been on a sailboat one time, like people are, involved in this world. So
that's so funny. Good to hear that, these interviews are much more personable than, I don't know what I'm assuming a lot of us imagine. But Destinee, I saw your answer in the chat. That's so cute. If you guys didn't see it, she listed her hobbies as hanging out with her grandma. And spent time during her interview showing them pictures of her grandma. I would love to be able to do that during my residency interview. Okay, that was awesome. I'm gonna move on to the next question. So in terms of a personal statement, do you guys have any specific tips, any general tips, approaches, things not to do, etc.?
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing my personal statement, which I know is like super nerdy. I I took like a narrative medicine course in med school and things like that. And I think I totally agree with what Axel said earlier about kind of, when you sit down and you like write your application, you're thinking about your personal statement, you like look back at what you've done and you kind of come up with like your personal brand, right? Like you don't necessarily sit down and think, I'm going to do these things in med school because I want to be perceived this way. But once you've like done them and you look back, you're like, okay, these are the things that kind of come out as like what I've been passionate about in med school. And I think being able to tell a story off of that for your personal statement is much more compelling than like relisting your CV or telling that one time that you like did CPR on a patient and saved their life and you're like a hero. I think, so I think that really made my personal statement writing experience like much more enjoyable. I think also just, making sure you're giving yourself plenty of time, because writing and like creative processes take a lot of work, and a lot of us as like scientific humans aren't necessarily the best at like sitting down and having like these creative moments. And then I think the other thing that I was told was like 90% of personal statements are like totally forgettable, and that's fine. Like you want to be either in that 90% of being totally forgettable or the 5% that's like incredibly positively memorable. You just don't want to be in that 5% that's just like cringy and says or writes things that maybe don't reflect well on you.
I think really important though is that if you have something on your application that's a red flag, that you address it in like 2 to 3 lines in your personal statement, whether big or small, like whether you think that it might be a red flag or you might not get an interview somewhere because maybe they think it's bad, just own it and write it. All you have to do is just say, this is what happened, this is what I learned from it, and move on. Because again, it's going to go right in the mix of that 90% of your personal statement that they're just going to forget one day. But at least you took ownership and they now know what happened and whether they're going to ask you on your interview or they're not. I had something on my application that I personally did not think was very great, but it was something so minor, but I threw it in my personal statement. I wrote about it, and half of the people during my interview said, oh, I read about what happened. Like, is there anything else you want to add to it? Or we could just talk about it. And then that was it. Or they didn't even ask me at all because nobody even cared, or they didn't read my personal statement. Other suggestion, my school had a free writing center. I am horrible at writing. I basically just did like word vomit onto paper like 100 times. And then like once a month I met with someone for free, like at my school, maybe your school has it. And she would kind of like help me chop it up and write really nice grammar and would help me put it into like a normal thing. So it was my words and, you know, my thoughts, but at least it helped me kind of get somewhere, because I don't think my parents can read any more of my essays ever again. So if there's someone that will help you with that, that's really great. And I think that might help you out a lot. So just check out with your school and see if they have something, because if your school is connected with some undergraduate university, I'm sure they have something available for you.
Also, you can write in your last paragraph if you have a connection to a certain place or to a program that might not be otherwise obvious in the rest of your application. Just make sure that when you save the file that you're very clear about which programs you're going to send it to, because you don't want to send it to the wrong program.
Yeah, that would not be great. Okay, cool. Let's next question. Let's see. What are some subtle things that applicants or interviewees should or shouldn't do that you guys have learned over time? So as residents interviewing applicants, and then as M4s who have just gone through this process. I'm gonna pick on Alex for this.
We've kind of covered, I don't know, the things that I feel like are important, like making sure you're not BSing or fluffing your application pretty much is like critical thing. I don't know, like come back to me or popcorn into someone else, because I feel like maybe interview process, like we can talk about.
Can you say it one more time? I was typing someone's answer. What was the question?
What are some subtle things that applicants or interviewees should or shouldn't do that you guys have noticed over time or learned from yourself over the past year in terms of, you know, the application?
In terms of the interview, I would say, and I don't know if you guys are planning on having another panel for like how to interview well, because that's like a whole separate thing. But I would say I didn't know how to interview before interviewing for residency. I'm like looking back at all the jobs and like med school interviews I had, and I'm like cringing because I just like would answer their question with a very generic answer. But I learned through my narrative medicine course, you know, that you want to have an experience to like bring to every, like a story or an experience to bring to every answer. So I think that sitting down and like writing, thinking about all of your significant experiences that relate to why you want to do medicine or emergency medicine or whatever, it can be really meaningful. But that's like later on, I guess, for the interview process.
Okay. Alex, if you had anything else you wanted to add, I can come, like, we don't have to stay on this topic.
It's more just, I feel like, yeah, I think it's kind of jumping into the interview kind of stuff. There's really not much you can do over paper except just making sure that you really, you have everything complete and on time. Like, you know, get that done like as soon as you can in the summer. It sucks. Like, we're very good at procrastinating. I think like ER doctors in general are very good at like doing things last minute because that's when we're most efficient, right? Get your stuff down early and just don't think about it. Like, I mean, you can always go back and change and add things, but you really, really want to get this done and just have it like out of sight, out of mind. Personal statement, just word vomit onto pages. I think I saw Destinee writing that, like really, and you can come back and you can cut it down as much as you want. My personal statement, I essentially made it was a story of an event of a day that happened to me essentially. I might've mentioned emergency medicine once, like the words once in my entire application, because I was just more talking about me as a person and how that event affected me and who I am because of it. And I think, you know, really just let this be your own story. Don't be what you think programs are looking for. Be yourself because they want you to be yourself. They don't want you to be the cookie cutter thing that you think they need.
This is one more thing for personal statements I'll say is that a program director once told me that if you have some like, you know, huge tragedy in your life that you want to write about and that like somehow pushed you towards emergency medicine, that is fine to write about, but like, just know a lot of times they do want to talk to you about your personal statement, and it also might make the interviewers like, they don't want to make you relive this moment over and over and over again every single interview and make you talk about, you know, something extremely tragic that happened in your life. So if you are not okay talking about it, you know, maybe don't make that your entire personal statement and why you want to go into emergency medicine, because they don't want you to cry on the interview, and like, they don't want to make you uncomfortable, and like, you don't want to be uncomfortable. So just, you know, really think about that before you write about that.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Because I'm sure I know people who definitely just, they write it in their personal statement thinking that's it. And then if they get asked a bunch of questions during the interview, that could be a little uncomfortable. Okay, thank you guys. And the next things I think people want to know, what influenced your choices in picking which residency programs to apply to?
For me, it was, I mean, life stuff, I think, is a big part of it. My fiance is here. She wants to remain here. I'm from here. My whole family's here. I have family from abroad. I come from Central Africa. I moved to the US when I was like 10. And New York is a really easy place for family to come see me whenever they have time, right? So that all those things were really important for me. So those, I think a lot of the life stuff matters. When you're applying to residency, think about applying to a place where you want to live, or you might be interested in living, or that you might want to explore. I think that's really the main thing that I sort of took into consideration. I have a lot of things like tying me to the area. And not that I couldn't have left without the support of my loved ones. It would have been very supportive, but I just thought that was very kind of important to me. So I think that's definitely what I'd consider.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I know applying to med school doesn't feel like you have as much choice because you're just like trying to get in somewhere, or at least that's how I felt. But once you're at this process of like applying and getting interviews, you suddenly are able to kind of, like Axel said, like prioritize the things that matter to you. And it's okay to like be a human and prioritize things like family or like what kind of life you want. For me, I was open to a lot of geographic locations. I just like really wanted to leave Iowa. But for me, like once I got to my interviews, I was able to narrow things down kind of based on how I felt like they would support me as a program, how I felt like, you know, I also was like am very into like social medicine and wanting to have, you know, be able to serve different communities. And so that was really important to me to find programs that had diverse patient populations and things like that.
You want to make a list, pretty much like start of your audition rotations, of things that you want in a program, because this is as much of selling for them as it is for you. Okay. Like I knew I wanted to be somewhere where there's great critical care, where there's emphasis on teaching, where I'd have, you know, a fun time outside of work with the people that I'm working with. So a lot of things at the end of the day, when you look at surveys of what was important to people when they're applying, it's geography and good fit. Like those are the two top things, hand in hand all the time. Your list of things that you want in a program is going to be different from your friends, even if they're applying emergency medicine. And I think that's important. You're going to, anywhere you go for residency, you're going to end up a great certified physician. You have to pass certain criteria to graduate from residency everywhere. And it's the same, it's universal. You know, certain places will hold you to different standards because they have more of an emphasis on research. They have more emphasis on teaching. And that's things you want to know when you're applying that you're interested in. You know, once you get through interviews, at a certain point, everyone kind of melds together. So you really want to figure out places that you feel like they're meeting the stuff that you want to do in future. Like when I tell you my top 5 programs all on my rank list at the end of the day, they all had things that like hit my boxes that I wanted checked off. And they were different from my friends who were applying to the same specialty, competitive as well, you know?
I think Liz talked about this earlier, but it's important to know if you want to go to like an academic center, a county site, or a community center, or a program that has, you know, a mix of all of them. I had no idea that really all of this existed because I came into emergency medicine a little bit on the later side. So I made it a point to do an away rotation at an academic center, to do an away rotation at a county site, and to do an away rotation at a community site. Like one was a subspecialty and the rest were my main EMs, but it was important for me to know that. So when I actually went to apply, or when I started getting interviews, I was able to say like, you know what, that wasn't for me, that's for someone else, but that's not for me. So I'm not going to, apply there or take that interview. So make sure that you kind of look into those things. Some programs, have that where you'll be at their county site for most of the time, and they'll have like other community satellite sites that you can go to during your 3 years there, or 4 years, and also 3 versus 4 year program. You should know at the very beginning, I was like, oh, I don't care if it's 3 or 4 years. And then as I started applying, I was like, I only want a 3 year program. Some people didn't care. Some people wanted a 4 year program. So know those things kind of as you're going through your away rotations and the interview process.
And also just remember how like people do things differently. Some people are like spreadsheeters and they have a list of different things that they like about a program, what you don't. I'm more of a like, how does it make me feel when I walk in the place? Like, how do I vibe with people? Probably because I'm lazy, but I also just think it's honestly kind of the best way to do it, unless you've got like certain extenuating life circumstances. But I really think that's kind of how I did it, like how I felt when I was rotating, how people made me feel, how I felt like I was being nurtured, I think is really important. And that's kind of what I went off of. So that's also really important. Your gut is a very important thing.
Last thing, I'm sorry, if you're a DO applicant, do not sell yourself short. If you guys were on the other DO panel, I probably said the same thing. Apply to programs that have never taken a DO before. Like you can be that one DO that gets the interview or, gets accepted there. Don't apply to someone and be like, oh, they've never taken anyone in the last like 4 years, so I'm not going to apply there. Like, don't even go by that. You're your own applicant, you're a different person. You could have gotten the same MCAT score as the MD candidate next to you, but you just ended up at a different school. So really just like don't sell yourself short and apply to all of the programs that you want to, regardless of, whether there's MD or DOs there. Just kind of throw that out there.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, this is great combo, guys. So in the last 10 minutes or so, we're going to focus on the interview trail. I have no idea what the interview process looks like. So if you guys can give kind of a general overview of the process. I'm assuming things are virtual again this year, unless anybody knows information that I don't. But maybe let's start with one of our M4s who just went through it. Liz?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I think the NYEMSC just said that they are recommending to keep to virtual interviews. I think a lot of people liked how it went last year, and it kind of equaled out the playing field for some people who couldn't travel to programs that weren't in their state. So I think that after submitting, for us, it was like mid or late September that everything was sent in and PDs and APDs could start seeing our applications. And then I think I remember the interview invitation started rolling out in October. And I remember I was like super anal about it. I got an Apple Watch because I wanted to be like one of the people that got the invitations right away. I spoke to my clerkship director, so she was super understanding of like me checking my emails, because some of the interviews fill up really quickly and there's only a certain set of days that you can sign up for. And that's through ERAS or Thalamus, which is an app that you get invitations through. So I would make sure to have Thalamus downloaded beforehand. We were recommended to either keep like a Google Calendar or like a planner if you're more old fashioned like me, just to keep track of all your days. And there's a lot of information to like send at you guys right now. So we'll probably like have another event closer to the application cycle to talk about this stuff again, but that's just a general overview. And peak interview season, I think, was November, December, January, at least for me. So I would say try to keep those months free. Like I scheduled my vacation blocks and virtual blocks for that time. And then someone else can talk about like how the interview day went generally.
I just want to add to the emails like thing and having an Apple Watch. I didn't buy an Apple Watch, but I had like email notifications that would like forward me texts. And then I had a couple interviews earlier on, like end of September, October, and I knew I would be expecting interviews for other dates, programs. And so I forwarded my emails to my little brother, who is very like responsive to his emails. So he would know if I were in an interview. I like texted him and then was like, for these hours, can you please monitor my emails? And then I like had a spreadsheet, just like Axel said, I had a spreadsheet of which programs I was prioritizing, so that he would know if I got multiple emails to care more about responding to one email over the other. It was like a whole lot.
I got an interview at 3 o'clock in the morning one night, which was I think it was a fluke, but it was very mean of them. I happened to just randomly wake up at 5 a.m. and saw it and was able to quickly schedule an interview. And by the time it was 9 a.m., there were no spots left. So it is sort of a stressful time in that sense. But, you know, if you can just keep your phone on loud, just like everyone said, tell your clerkship director, whoever you're with, hey, I'm not texting, I'm actually just like waiting for interviews. Like they totally understand. It's totally okay. If you happen to be on like a surgery rotation or something and you're going into surgery, give your phone to someone, give them all your passwords, give them your planner. It's just, that's kind of something that you'll have to worry about in November, October, but not now. Now just write your personal statement.
This also sounds very high stress. And I think it was initially as you start the process. Once you're like starting the interviews and you go through the flow of it, it feels, it's honestly, it's like kind of an exciting time. And I was very much like, oh, I'm a DO. I don't know, like, we'll see. I'm not probably going to get that many interviews. And at a certain point, like you have to start saying no to interviews too, hopefully, you know, if you're in a good, fortunate position. But if you're not interested in a program, if you're like, oh, this is someone that I really didn't want to interview at, I would just make sure you email them right away and say, thank you so much. Be courteous and let them know, because don't be that person to fill your list of, you know, I have 20 interviews coming up. There are other people in your shoes. This is a team sport kind of specialty who are waiting for that first interview. You know, if you don't think you want to go there, that's okay. They are not going to be offended. They will move on to the next person on their list, and it's very okay.
And give them at least 1 or 2 weeks advance notice if you want to cancel, because it looks unprofessional if you don't.
Just to clarify, so is a lot of the anxiety around getting the time and the date you want, or is it because you might not even get a time or a date? Because if they send you an interview, like there's no chance that you won't get one. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah, you might not get it. It's hard because they'll send out like a blast, and then everyone will get it, and then you have to like try sort of like click the date that you want as fast as you can and hit submit. And then if that doesn't work, then you have to go to a different date, but then you have to make sure that you don't have another interview on that date. And then it kind of just goes into that cycle. So really just staying organized during that 2-month span is really important. I don't really know how to get around that high stress anxiety mode. It's kind of just, you live through it and then it sort of just dissipates, and then you just enjoy interview season and sitting on a really comfortable chair in your pajama pants and a suit top. And every time no one's interviewing you, you just get to get up and go have a snack or go to the bathroom. You don't actually have to like walk around in like uncomfortable shoes. So it is kind of like a really pleasant experience besides the interview email issues.
Gotcha. And can one of you guys speak to what interview day looks like?
Sure,
I can talk about.
No, you can go ahead.
Axel, go ahead.
Sure. I think it'll vary based on the institution. There's kind of a general sort of like welcome. They'll introduce you to a bunch of different people in administration, some of whom you'll remember, some of whom you won't. Clerkship directors, associate clerkship directors, variety of different individuals. They might have like a little presentation about what the institution is like, what the structure of the interview day will look like. Eventually, you'll get split into small group rooms. Usually, the interview with maybe multiple individuals, depending on how many people are supposed to interview that day, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, that'll kind of vary. And that's just kind of how it goes. There's usually like a little break for lunch. They'll give you a little bit of time sometimes in between interviews to kind of just gather and get your bearings under you. But that's kind of generally what I remember. And then they'll kind of just close it out. They'll thank everybody. And then in terms of somebody mentioned thank you notes, I know some programs will tell you like we appreciate them. Some will say like it's fine, just like don't send them. And if they say don't send them, like please don't send them. And I think that's kind of that's from what I recall, it's kind of the general sort of overview of it, but I think it'll vary depending on the program. There's some things that might be a little bit more nuanced.
I also just wanted to quickly add that something I realized later is that you get really tired from interviews. Like even though they're over Zoom, you're just on for the whole time for hours at a time. And I remember like after the interview ended, I would like close my camera, I would click off the Zoom and just kind of like dissolve into myself. And I think it's important to try to schedule a day or so in between, especially as you get further along, because you might get tired doing interviews back to back to back.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question before we wrap up. Let's see. Is there anything that any of you guys wish that you guys had known sooner or done differently while you were pursuing this route in EM? So at any point during medical school, or I guess even in your first year of residency?
Not differently, but there's one thing I would say is that since I kind of came into the game of emergency medicine later, my CV was sort of all over the place with like different specialties, like research in this, research in that. And I was like, oh, what if when I apply, they're going to say, oh, you're not, are you dual applying, or, you know, are you even interested in emergency medicine? There's ways to tailor your application, you know, in a way that will show that, you know, you made a path to emergency medicine. So like, or you even had like a niche in like something. So like you had like a ton of like orthopedic surgery research papers done or presentations done, but now you're going emergency medicine. Like that is totally okay. You should still put all of that stuff on your application, and you can just tell them that that's your passion and you enjoy that part of the emergency department. So don't feel like that's a bad thing. You can always make everything a good thing.
For me and for anyone who's considering going maybe elsewhere, like to a different state from where you trained, I think I wish, I appreciate how much money I saved doing virtual interviews, but I wish I had been able to do in a way to, or to at least like see or know the like ED environments. I know I had heard that like New York City emergency departments are like crazy and a cluster, but like there's like such a shock, I think, coming from a different place. Other EDs like don't function like this in other parts of the country, and I think that if you like your experience here, you know, in medical school in New York and in the EDs here, then it might be opposite shock when you go elsewhere. So I think at least being able to like ask about how the EDs function, or if they function, like things like that, could be really important. That I wish I could have thought about a little bit more.
Yeah, the New York ED thing is real, specifically like the New York City thing. It's bad, but not to discourage you, but it's kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's great for training. I think that's part of like why, you know, you get the good training experience. And there's lots of things that are great, I think, about learning how to do many tasks. But it's definitely not something I had experienced before.
I would take up programs on follow-up questions if you're interested in something in particular, because at the end of the day, like I mentioned before, places are going to start blending together. You know, your favorite choices, the people that are your least favorite, that'll kind of flesh out quickly, but the middle ones you might have a hard time with. People in EM really want you to succeed. You know, I'm almost positive I ended up getting an interview on another interview because I mentioned something and he's like, oh, I have a friend who's really involved in this. And that same day, that friend, I got an interview invite, like weird stuff. Not that normally happens, but it would be ironic maybe. But my point is to make sure that you are doing stuff that you want to do. I'm kind of losing my train of thought. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So follow up with email questions to these programs, because there are people there who might, you know, really change your experience. Like, you know, there's someone at my program who's very involved in international medicine. And like, I've given out his email to applicants because it's something that they might want to pursue in future. And he's interested in talking about it with them. You know, it's things that I was afraid to ask because I feel like a lot of the time I look at a program's website and I was like, oh, I should know this if I, you know, it looks like I'm not interested. I didn't review their website. Like, no, ask about the experiences with this kind of, you know, whatever they have offering there, because otherwise you're not going to know, you know, and it will start to blend together.
You can always ask residents to call you on to talk to them on the phone after your interview day. You can always reach out to them. A lot of their emails are on the websites. After I had a bunch of my interviews, again, all of the programs sort of blended together because sort of like Axel, I kind of didn't really make a spreadsheet. I didn't like record myself after interviews to remember how I felt with the warm and fuzzies or anything like that. They all kind of just blended together. And I was just like, I only remember the names really. So when I kind of narrowed down my list and I was like, you know, what do I want to do? You know, I called a bunch of residents at all these programs, you know, second years, third years, interns, to see how they like their experience. And they'll be really honest with you because they don't want you to come to a program that you're not going to be happy at, or that you won't fit at, or maybe the program's not right for you. So you're better off, you know, getting like extra input from other people than just going based off of your interview day. And I think that really helped me out a lot.
Yeah, just last thing to add is we mentioned a lot of things like 3 versus 4 years, academic versus community. It's okay if you don't know right now what type of program you want to apply or go to. I applied to a huge mix, and I only really figured out through doing my interviews what I wanted to pursue. So it's okay if you change your mind, and it's okay if you don't have all the answers right now, because you will figure it out, and everyone's going to be okay. Everyone's going to match into the program with their dreams. And because it is 9:01, I just wanted to say that we're going to be sending out the contact information for the panelists. If everyone is okay with that, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions whatsoever. If you wanted to rewatch or just send the link of this recording, we'll be uploading it on our YouTube channel. So thank you everyone for coming to our event, and to our panelists again for your time. We're going to be having another panel event in a week on the 27th about EM fellowships, and that'll be more of a speed dating event. So be on the lookout for that. Jax, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that covered it. I know everyone had, so many questions that, we can't possibly answer all in 1 hour, but I think this was a great conversation. Thank you again to our panelists for giving us so much of your insight and wisdom. Hopefully, I guess you'll see some of us in the audience here and me on the interview trail, hopefully. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Good luck, everyone. You're going to do great.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's gonna be great.
Go hang out with your grandma, Destinee.
She's in Iowa. I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll FaceTime her.
Good. All right.
All right. Thank you guys.
Have a good shift, Destinee.
Thank you.